I just don't understand why she'd go up to Jin and tell him Horobi's dying. There was no need. Jin was there in his own world and he intruded on that and we're supposed to feel sorry for you. What was that supposed to be showing us? That Jin is definitely irredeemable and therefore it's okay to kill him? Otherwise we, the audience, might feel a bit iffy about our hero killing a child. Is that why? Just, look, see? Only someone who's pure evil would attack precious darling Izu. Clearly we were right to kill him. I am still irate. I'm also having a really bad jaw day and I'm basically talking through grit teeth, so I apologise for that. So we start with Izu in the ZAIA space area asking what happened to her. And if you're watching my weird rambling videos as the series was airing, you'll know I'm always really interested in specific scenes that are shown in flashbacks or flashback type scenes. And the only scene we see ZAIA showing Izu is Jin attacking her, nothing before. And I understand that while that's the only scene we're seeing, that doesn't mean that's the only scene she's seeing. But it's still the only clip we, the audience, are being shown, and that's interesting. Because that clip on its own, it's so out of context. It's Jin pulling his hand back, yelling, "Why is a human gear like you?" smiling and then attacking her. And that on its own is so violent, and so clearly Jin attacking Izu for no reason. It's painting it as though the cause of this attack is purely Izu smiling. She was faultless, she was the innocent victim, but that's not what happened. And it's interesting because there's such a theme here, not just here, but in the series as a whole. There's such a theme of viewing the same event through different perspectives. Adato was a child at daybreak on the outskirts, protected by his human-geared dad. Fuwa was, as we believed in the moment, a child very much slap bang in the middle of daybreak, being attacked by a human-gear. The same event has affected them differently. It's set up that way all throughout the series, of viewing the same thing through different lenses, yet we never actually delve into that. And I won't shut up about that one line from Izu at the end about how perhaps biased data should be the thing we truly fear, before completely ruining it by launching into Adato could help, but this could have been so interesting to go into. The potential for 01 to be a show that delves into the idea of people reacting to the same things differently, and the truth lying somewhere between those two perspectives, was always there. The idea of not just going along with what lies on the surface, but actively digging into the issue and finding out the truth for yourself. The fact that we are deliberately only being shown that part, not what Izu says beforehand, that then leads Jin to reacting like that, or Jin carrying his dying dad afterwards, is purely through the lens of Izu being a pure, innocent, blameless victim and Jin the evil, unsavable villain. It could have been interesting for Jin to then have a flashback of the same interaction, but cutting out any redeemable Izu moments and just focusing on her saying what she says, and then Jin carrying Horobi. But of course, I'm sure the actual reason for this is to just deliberately paint Jin as the pure, irredeemable bad guy to justify what Adato does later. We can't have Jin be sympathetic in this episode if we're then going to pretend Adato is a lovely, lovely person. I'm going to be honest, it also really bothers me that Izu gets off so lightly. It feels like Izu and Horobi getting hurt, and Adato and Jin being left to deal with that, is supposed to be a parallel, but Izu gets to be brought back to the fancy lab and be taken care of and repaired and get away with basically no lasting damage whatsoever, whereas Horobi gets brought back to their dark, damp hideout, put on the floor with a bloody, I don't know what that is, a giant pipe as a pillow, to then die and get stepped on by Guy. It's just so weird because the entire setup feels like it's supposed to make us sympathetic towards Horobi and Jin, but then the narrative still expects us to view Adato as this perfect saviour for killing someone we've just seen in such a sympathetic situation. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Again, this is one of those videos. So the scene is, Adato and Jin have henshined and are fighting, and Fuwa and Yu are watching. And Adato's fighting with this thing he nicked from Fuwa, and Fuwa's like, I guess he makes his own rules now, and I really, really can't stand when we have to pause whatever's happening so someone can talk about how amazing the main character is. It's something I really hated about Buffy, how pretty much every scene Buffy wasn't in was spent talking about Buffy like, oh my god, other people exist. But it's a lot more palatable when it comes from Fuwa. I mean, he's very much the dad of this side, you know? He's not going, wow, Adato sure is amazing. He's just making a comment, so as much as it does really make me roll my eyes whenever we need to hear someone talk about how amazing the hero is, at least it's in character. Fu is all about making his own rules, and now Adato is too. Still winds me up though. It's just a small pet peeve of mine. I can't stand when we have to pause the scene for someone to tell us how amazing the hero is, and I hate whenever a character is the only one who can do something. Anytime someone says, I'm the only one who can stop this, or I'm the only one who knows how to do whatever, I'm immediately just like, well, now I hope you fail. So I guess Adato never actually had a chance, really. Every time he's the only one who can stop someone, and every time someone talks about how great Adato is, the more that happens, the more I just want him to fail. Also, Adato makes his own rules now, does he? Because he seems way too willing to accept the rules, actually, and not question them. Adato says that he's going to put a stop to Meiwhalien Jinnai. Jin says they'll never stop. I am firmly rooting for Meiwhalien Jinnai. Then some Giga attack Adato, and I did a video a while back about how Toku fights are totally superior. And despite this fight being really visually intense and full of computer effects, Adato's flying in the air and then he's back on the ground and he moves at extreme speed, and something tells me the Gigas aren't actually there. And yet that fight goes on for 15 whole seconds with no cuts whatsoever. The camera follows Adato, but it also keeps its distance, so despite being clearly very heavily edited and Adato moving at an inhuman speed, it's still so fluid that you can both feel the energy but also see exactly what's happening, and despite all the movement, you're not being affected by change blindness, and I love it. Actually, you know what? I'm going to get as most enjoyment out of this as I can. I mean, okay, what happens in this scene is a Giga flies down from the sky and smashes into the ground, attacks Adato. Adato glides away at high speed. The Giga throws its weapons that react in a sort of boomerang effect, like the Maggia in the first or second episode that attacked Fua and Yua. Adato leaps up into the air, where another Giga shows up, smashes Adato back to the ground while doing the same thing with its weapons. Adato speeds forwards again and holds back both Giga, all in 15 seconds, but you can see it so clearly. I'm not sorry for gushing about that. Jin then holds the Sting Scorpion key and says, "Let's go, Horobi," and that even now feels like such a stab in the heart. I am so weak to that. He's taking Horobi to battle with him, his final battle. It's too early to start doing an Eiji, Jin. So it's Sting Scorpion's ability that smashes Adato into a building, and you know what? Good for him. Listen, I get really emotional over Sting Scorpion, okay? I did that entire video about it. So the fact that Sting Scorpion gets to carry on the fight when Horobi can't, that Horobi dies and then Sting Scorpion smashes Adato into a building, that felt so personal. Just as Adato is about to get obliterated, he's summoned up to the ZAIA subspace and Izu talks to him, and despite her having just almost died, she immediately resumes her normal tasks at hand. And it's so strange. It's almost as if nothing happened. I swear, Adato seeing Izu like that, I have a bigger reaction when my laptop freezes and then unfreezes and I realise I don't have to restart it. I understand that time doesn't freeze, it just moves a lot slower, so maybe they don't have time for a full emotional reunion, but if Edito's got time to say things like, "I see, so the president can do his best knowing his employees are behind him," and then make a joke for Izu to then explain, then he's got time to say, "Izu, thank God you're okay, but we don't actually care about Kyuubi around here." Granted, he does tell Izu to get better at the end of this interaction, but God, hacked by the Arc Horobi should not be showing more emotion than Adato. The fact that Adato telling Izu to get better comes after her showing up and helping him out with this new system, and him talking about having the support of his employees, makes it feel less like he wants her to get better because he cares about her, and more like he wants her to get better so she can continue benefiting him. But then the bit afterwards where they do that pinky promise locking their fingers together thing, that was legitimately precious. I know people show emotion in different ways. You don't need to be over the top, "Oh my God, Izu, I can't believe you're here, I was so worried," in order to be emotional. If Adato locking fingers with Izu is the extent of his emotional expression, that's fine. That's still Adato being emotional about Izu showing up again. It's the fact that she showed up, did her job first, and then Adato mentioned her well-being right at the end, after saying a bunch of stuff that didn't need to be said, so clearly it wasn't a time issue. That's what makes it feel very cold and emotionless. I wanted so badly to care about these two. It's also so hard to be excited about Adato's new power-up, because this should be such an exciting and dramatic moment. He's in a shroud of light, and it's a very slow reveal, and the Sutax and Naruto is standing there like a complete and total badass, and it should be such an exciting moment, but he's about to fight a baby who's just lost his dad. Even when, my favourite characters are usually villains or villain-coded anti-hero grey area kind of characters, but the fights between them and the hero are still exciting, and the power-ups are still exciting, but he's fighting a baby! There aren't a lot of ways you can spin that and come out the good guy. But anyway, he manages to subdue Jin fairly easily in yet another just beautiful fight scene. Choreographing and shooting fight scenes that happen primarily in the air is so hard. It's so hard because being in the air means you don't have much of a scales, especially when you're cutting here and there and everywhere, and it can get really disorientating when your hero can fly and is flying around all over the place. But in this, the whole time they're up in the air, the camera is on them the whole time. The camera follows Jin while Adato is darting about around him, and it's just such a clever way to be visually disorientating while also not. It's supposed to be disorientating. Jin doesn't know where Adato is going to be next. It's supposed to be fast-paced and confusing, but keeping the camera on Jin, who's being bashed about, and letting it follow him rather than trying to follow Adato dashing around, that gives that feeling of disorientation while also showing you clearly what's happening. And see, this is why I love Toku. Anyway, Jin hits the ground, and I need a bloody drink again. Jin says, we need to destroy humanity. And Adato says, what did humans do? You mean aside from sacrificing all the human gear at daybreak and never reviving them despite clearly being able to, deactivating human gear after completing their jobs, using human gear as tools, denying them basic rights such as marrying and holding public office and competing in sports, allowing them to be abused and having no safety protocols in place for abused human gear, refusing to pay them for their work, thus actually using them as slave labour? Okay, those things don't warrant killing humans. Killing is never the answer. When a Magyar is threatening a human, then killing them is necessary, but when a human is threatening a human gear, well then the human gear just needs to teach them why they shouldn't. Not even that. When a human gear is hacked into attacking humans, that's fine. When a human is being an arsehole, then the human gear needs to go out of their way to prove their worth. The fact that Guy can advocate for deactivating all human gear is in itself a huge problem. Humans are a threat to human gear. Killing them isn't the answer, but you can't just ask what did humans do as if humans are faultless. Perhaps a better thing to say would have been, I know things aren't fair, I know human gear suffer a lot, but we can change that. That killing isn't the answer, extinction isn't the answer, but things do still need to change. Acknowledging why Jin would be upset, why he would be saying these things. But the fact that Adato is asking what humans have done is so clueless. The fact that Adato isn't even able to understand why Jin would be saying these things is such a huge problem. And Jin says, I don't know, that's just what Horobi taught me. And at first I remember thinking, well, that's a bit of a cop-out. Like, oh great, we're villainizing Horobi. Horobi and the arc have become synonymous and we're setting up for no redemption for him. But honestly, I can completely buy that Horobi would hide the more dark and gritty details from Jin. Jin was such a carefree child, and while he wasn't afraid to ask questions, I think what's also important is that he's also not afraid to look things up himself. In the past, he's researched the concept of parent and child. He's researched what to do when a family member dies. Information outside of Horobi hasn't been cut off from him. Horobi is aware that Jin researches things himself, and he could restrict that, but he doesn't. And when Horobi asked Jin if he'd been researching family, Jin just nodded. There was no indication that Jin thought he might get into trouble for having researched something. If Jin wasn't supposed to research things, then when Horobi said, research that, did you? Jin would have had an oh shit, I've been sussed moment. And if Horobi didn't know Jin had a habit of researching things, he would have asked, where did you learn that? Not researched it, did you? Jin has a freedom of information, so understanding how, I don't know, it's just what Horobi taught me sounds, I feel like I have to leap to Horobi's defense here a bit, because he clearly isn't telling Jin what to think. He's not forcing a narrative onto Jin, and Jin has a lot more freedom of information than even Horobi himself does, clearly. If he was doing that, Jin wouldn't then have the potential to learn things himself. So to me, I don't know, it's just what Horobi taught me, indicates that Horobi It's not that he's forcing Jin to think this way, but more that Horobi is just not going into great detail about the horrors of humanity to his infant son. And Jin would never have really had that experience. Jin wasn't created with any one purpose. He's had the unique experience of being a Humagir raised by a Humagir away from humans. So Jin really wouldn't have personally witnessed as much as someone like Horobi would have. What I'm trying to say is that Horobi, who's been hacked by the Ark, teaching Jin that humans are bad, is not the same as the Ark hacking Horobi and forcing him to attack humanity. Adato then has this weird line about how, if Jin hadn't learned from evil, that if his upbringing hadn't been subjected to evil, then they wouldn't have to fight. How awful is that? What, people only get one chance and that's it? If you've had a shitty upbringing, well, sucks to be you, but no one can change, so you may as well just die. What a horrible message. First of all, Jin did not have a bad upbringing, and I will defend that for the rest of my life, but even if he had, what, that's it? Like, no rehabilitation on offer, not even trying to talk to him, just accepting that, oh, well, if that's what you've been taught, then there's no helping you. Adato, you are a human adult with free will. You don't have to fight this a 5-year-old child soldier, actually. Is the fact that he doesn't even try. If he'd have tried reaching out to Jin rather than just giving up instantly, but Jin kept going after him and kept trying to kill people, and eventually Adato had to make a tough call and decide that Jin is posing too much of a threat, and he tried to talk him down, but it didn't work, so killing him is the best thing he can do at the time. And then later on, dwelling on that decision, then killing Jin in this moment would have been so much easier to accept, but he just doesn't try. He never tries. He always just gives up and takes the easy way out, and that's not compassion, that's horrible. And my god, if Adato gives up on Jin because he was told some bad things, then Horobi, who's actively been hacked and had his mind twisted and manipulated, has no bloody hope, does he? I just think about Sogo trying to befriend Ura and Oda. It's been a while, so I don't know how to pronounce them anymore. But Sogo trying to befriend the two Time-Jackers despite them not really going to great lengths to do the same, or Kaito right now wanting to befriend Stacy and being really upset about defeating him, or Zack from Gaim, who isn't even a main character, noticing Michi at the end and going over and trying to convince him to dance with them. I think about those wholesome moments that make a hero, and Adato is doing none of that. Yet he's being treated as though he's doing it better than anyone. Just imagine if Sogo had been in Adato's place here, or Gentaro. Actually, let's be honest, if Gentaro was here, Metsuba Jinlei would have been saved already. I'm just having a hard time picturing any other Kamen Rider, main Kamen Rider, who would have actually done this in this scenario. And a morally grey main character could have been interesting, but he'd then have to be treated as one. Like, a 5-year-old child had just held his dad in his arms and watched him die. He'd lashed out and hurt someone who came and rubbed it in, and then he carried his dad home to die. His dad, who had been tortured and manipulated and mind-controlled for 12 years, and yet was still able to raise his child as someone bold enough to ask questions, smart enough to try and find information for himself. He was someone said child was never afraid to talk to, never afraid to touch and grab, but they were both still in a damaging environment, one forced upon them by a satellite created by humans. They were both still, for all intents and purposes, raised as child soldiers. While Horobi was visibly punished for speaking out and for asking questions, Jin never was. Jin was given the best upbringing he possibly could have gotten. Horobi always answered his questions the best he could. But how did Adato respond when Jin asked him why that one human was protecting his Humagir daughter? By yelling at him and belittling him for needing to ask. Adato has clearly portrayed himself as a person Jin cannot talk to. Izu is not someone Jin can talk to. Ikazuchi is dead, Ansatsu-chan is dead, and now Horobi is dead. Jin, the 5-year-old child, had nothing and nobody left. So Jin reacted the only way he knew how, by continuing the mission that satellite programmed negatively by a human had forced upon them, both. To attack humanity, who up until now have done nothing but kill his friends and family. From Jin's perspective, that's all that's happening. And our hero decided not to talk to him, not to try and reach out, not to try and understand him, and in turn try to help Jin understand. He did none of that. He decided this 5-year-old child soldier was beyond saving and killed him. Not as a final option he desperately didn't want to do, but would if necessary. No, that was his first option, to just kill him. No, but it's such a saint though, right? Then he delivers his line of, "I hope one day humans and Humagir can smile and laugh together," and what a cruel thing to say to a child you're about to kill, whose dad just died in his arms. There's just such this disconnect when it comes to Adato. The fact that he doesn't even know what humans did to warrant Humagir being upset just proves that his desire for humans and Humagir to smile is just superficial. He can't possibly be prepared to put the work in if he doesn't even know there's work to put in. There could so easily be a connection here, actually. Jin attacked Izu because she hurt him, and Jin also wants to destroy humanity because humans keep hurting Humagir. Jin gained singularity because humans kept killing his family. Jin lashed out at Izu because she rubbed Horobi's death in his face, emotionally hurting him. Jin wants to destroy humanity. Why? Because humans keep doing things to Humagir. If Jin had been allowed to express that Izu upset him and that's why he lashed out at her, Adato could have then had a moment of realisation because he's witnessing humans be terrible to Humagir. All the elements are right there, we're just not connecting them. You know what's really sad about Jin's death? When Horobi died, he started reaching out for Jin, but he died before Jin could take his hand, so he'll never know that Jin held his hand. And just before Jin dies, he reaches out his hand, but no one's there to take it. Jin's last words are about how humanity will definitely be extinguished as per the will of the Ark. But you know, obviously it was all Horobi's fault Jin was like this, and there was absolutely no saving him. It is interesting how both Horobi and Jin's last words were about the Ark. Horobi's were extinguish humanity as per the will of the Ark, and Jin's were humanity will definitely be extinguished as per the will of the Ark. And I personally interpret that as Horobi really not having much outside of the Ark. I explained it better in my last video, but it's Horobi trying to reach out to Jin, but only having the Ark words to say, and now Jin is sort of reaffirming Horobi's last words, that essentially he's saying that Horobi's last wishes will definitely happen. They're so tragic. Also, this makeup. I love having AI characters because you can be so much more graphic with them. Half of Jin's face is peeled off when you can see some of his skin pulling away. Imagine doing that with a human character. So Jin dies, he explodes, his data survives though. I know that's in Project ZAIA, I think, but the fact that Horobi built his baby's data thing is so strong. These two need to stop giving me so many feelings, I swear. And Fua is so happy, and he says, "It's finally over," and oh, honey, I don't know how I saw you this, but it's only episode 16, I don't think it is. He's so relieved, bless him, I feel so bad. Okay, this next bit is going to sound weird, so bear with me, I'll explain. We see Horobi dead on the floor. Why is this so much more painful now, actually? Horobi is dead on the floor, the printers are going off behind him, and Amatsugai walks in and steps on him. Which on the one hand is, oh my god, how dare you get your filthy foot off my poor precious Horobi, you monster. But on the other hand, that was the moment I realised he is going to be such a fun villain. Standing on the dead body of my favourite character, that was the moment I completely fell in love with Guy. That's weird, isn't it? Look, I just love a good, creepy, disturbing villain, and there was no need. That felt like such a personal move. I kind of expected it to go somewhere. I think it was very easy to see Horobi as a character who had clearly been wronged by humanity, clearly hated and feared them, who had his earpieces removed, which felt like it should have been more relevant than it was. And to now see Guy coming in and standing on his dead body. And he actively looks down at Horobi for a while too. For a good chunk of time, he's looking down at Horobi's dead body as he steps down on him. It was so easy to link these things, and later on, when you learned Guy was responsible for the Ark in the first place, it was even easier to connect those two things. I expected some kind of backstory between those two, and honestly, the more you watch them, the more glaring it kind of becomes, and honestly, we still know basically nothing about Horobi, so let us just push together the tiny little shreds we are actually given. I am going to make one of those detective boards one day with a little red string to work out Horobi's backstory. But it was just such a personal act, you know? It would be one thing to just completely ignore the dead Humagir on the floor because it's a Humagir, who cares? But to actively stand on him, I mean, that comes from a place of vitriol and arrogance, doesn't it? Like, it's not that he views Humagir as just tools, he actively views them as beneath him personally, and takes delight in that, and he's everything I want in a villain. And wow, he did not disappoint. He was so much fun right up until he was kidnapped and replaced by his not-so-evil twin. So Izu wakes up, because she's fine. Horobi and Jin, they're dead, and they're not going to stay dead, but they're going to be ripped apart from each other because of this very moment, and things can never be the same again. Meanwhile, Adato and Izu, they're fine. Totally fine. No bad consequences whatsoever. We see from Izu's perspective, and her vision is all blurry, except for Adato. Adato is very clear, like he's the only thing she can see fully. And that's sweet when it's between people who have known each other for a very long time. Someone waking up from a coma and their best friend or significant other being the only thing in their line of vision. That's sweet and symbolic and meaningful and whatever, but in this context it's so disturbing. And I know that's my favourite word for the series, but it's true. Izu, a Humagir who was made for Adato to support Adato, who has only had any real interaction with Adato, is only seeing Adato in her vision while everything else is blurred, and she says, Adato Shacho. They're not equals. It's just weird. She shouldn't be devoting herself to just one person, and definitely not now. Adato murdering a child soldier without even trying to reach out to him in any meaningful way, showing no remorse for it, and they're just being seen by Izu in this almost angelic light. It's disturbing. Also, I hate touching people. I've been social distancing all my life. But if someone I deeply cared about, who I thought was dead or was at least severely injured, was suddenly fine, I would be hugging. I would not just be standing there. Just saying. I just feel like he should be doing more than just standing there and smiling and saying, you're better, welcome back. It just feels like every interaction between those two is so weird and so cold, which is nothing to do with the acting, by the way. I just want to say that. I mean, they're not being given any lines to act with. You know, I would just hate for anyone to think I was criticising the acting, because I'm definitely not. Adato says, everything I've achieved until now as the clueless president I am, they were thanks to you. What has he done? What have you done, though? As a clueless president, which I'm glad you're owning up to, but you should not be complacent about, what have you actually done? Like, I swear to God, nothing has changed. Look, he's probably saved a bunch of human lives as a Kamen Rider at this point, but as the president of Hidden Intelligence, which is specifically what he's talking about, what has he actually done? You've sold a few people and murdered a child, great. You've left some people in abusive situations and taught them to be complacent in their abuse. Honestly, as soon as he said that, I thought, don't you go blaming Izu for everything you've done. Izu then says, aiding you the best I can is my job after all, and do you see why their relationship isn't cute? Because all she cares about is supporting Adato. All she exists for is supporting Adato. There has to be something more than that. She needs more depth, otherwise it's grooming, basically, and that's weird. So now there's an emergency board meeting to discuss Adato's potential dismissal, and Adato says he has to take responsibility and settle things. Kind of feels like he's not going to take responsibility, though. I'll be honest, I don't remember this next bit right now, but I'm not convinced. Let's see, shall we? So we launch right into it, and the board take a vote, and Fukusori is the only person who wants Adato to be dismissed as president. And feeling a bit embarrassed, he's the only one with his hand up, and feeling embarrassed, he scratches his head instead, and Shesta tells him off for being confusing. She tells him off. The fact that she's so easily able to just tell him off like that. Shesta and Fukusori should not be more developed than Adato and Izu, and yet, like, she just tells him off. I'm sorry, but that's worth talking about. And then he reacts to having been told off by her. That tiny little interaction between the two of them showed so much more. Sanzo, the managing director, says, our president protected the company from disaster 01, carrying the burden of responsibility on his own, risking his life to fight the terrorists. He's our company's hero. And everyone stands up and claps like the best r/that happened post. Shesta declares that Adato won't be dismissed as president, and Adato stands up, and I expect him to do as he said and take responsibility for things, because, you know, he's not perfect. I mean, my God, what a moment it would have been. It shown some remorse for killing Jin then. If that had been the moment he'd have thought, I don't know, something, said, I may have protected the company, but I've sacrificed the well-being of so many Humagir to do so, or terrorists, what if it wasn't that simple? Just something, because he has done some terrible things, and he did just say he was going to take responsibility. And it would have been cool to make it seem like he meant take responsibility for the company, but what he actually meant was take responsibility for the pain he's caused to Humagir, but Nope. He stands up, says nothing. Izu says, please continue to do your best, and Adato smiles as Chester and Sanzo stand behind him clapping, and sure, Fugzoi threatens that one wrong move and he'll take his job, but that's it. Adato then just says thanks for having me and bows while the entire board keep clapping, and that's it. Way to take responsibility, Adato. God, Adato and Izu are having it so bloody easy in this episode. All the while Jin is dead and Horobi's dead body's being stood on. And it's not like, yay, the villains are dead, because they're not. They're abuse victims who were just needlessly killed, while the heroes are having a whale of a time. It's just so hard, because nothing Adato does ever feel satisfying. Yua punching Guy was so bloody satisfying, because they both absolutely deserved that. And Horobi getting to smile at the end while Jin wrapped his arms around him and called him dad. That felt so satisfying because, dear God, he earned that. But Adato is just being given things. He inherited the company and by extension the driver. He doesn't have to do anything special to keep his position as president. He doesn't even have to say anything. They just all immediately applaud him. And even when Guy does steal the company from him, Izu then immediately registers another company and he gets to henshin again and everything is fine. It never feels like he earned anything compared to Horobi, who was hacked and tortured and had his mind invaded and controlled, finally breaking free himself and being left in a relatively okay position given the circumstances, or Fua being routinely taken over by Naki and having his entire childhood be a lie means it's so nice when in the end he gets to take control of his own life. Adato, on the other hand, doesn't get any consequences and never seems to have to work for anything, so when he does just get given stuff, it's hard to care because he hasn't done a single thing to earn it. Yua is at the AIMS headquarters in a soon-to-be very specific basement area watching a report about how Metsuo Jinnai have been apprehended so Humagear won't go berserk anymore. And look, I just love how AIMS identify there are probably 4 members of Metsuo Jinnai, tick off 3, and then decide, it's probably alright actually. Yeah, Metsuo Jinnai are gone, for definite. I feel like there's a way this could be explained, like Naki actively preventing Fua from thinking about them, but Fua is, so I just feel like this could have been explained other than AIMS are clearly incompetent. Like, you're thorough enough to think, wait a minute, Metsuo Jinnai, Raiden, Kaminari, it's you, you're the spy, but then forget there's potentially a 4th member. Also, when it becomes clear Metsuo Jinnai are not gone, are the public ever told? I feel like that's maybe something we should have been shown, transparency and all that. Fua says, what are we going to do with that? And oh my god, what are we going to do with what? What could it be? It's Horobi on the floor in a straitjacket, deactivated, and he's all tied up and he looks so vulnerable. And Fua says, what have I even been fighting all this time? My hate for Metsuo Jinnai is all I had, but now all I see is a clump of metal. And even as Yua leaves, Fua just can't tear his eyes away from Horobi. Fua having a moment of sympathy with Horobi. Fua having a moment where he acknowledges how non-threatening Horobi really looks. Fua starting to come around is honestly so intriguing, isn't it? I was so bloody ready for this. Fua perhaps has one of the best character developments in the entire series, and I love it. And just Adato, who keeps talking about how Humagear is family and he wants humans and Humagear to smile again, just killed a kid. Meanwhile, Fua, who keeps talking about wanting to destroy all humanity, and Metsuo Jinnai specifically, is here showing sympathy towards Horobi starting to question things. Asking what he's been fighting this whole time, because the Humagear on the floor right now does not look like the terrorists he's been made to fear. It almost felt like they were developing in opposite directions, and you know what, that could have been cool. And now it is Christmas, and a Happy New Year, na 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 na. Isn't it hilarious and so indicative of my luck with Kamen Rider that even in a series where everyone survives in the end, my favourite character still died at Christmas time? That is hilarious to me. And it's just so weird. Okay, Izu is here talking about how many people are smiling, and Adato's like, wow, we've got to make sure to preserve this dream. And there's nice, wholesome music playing in the background, as if we didn't just murder a child. And I can't help but feel like all the humour gear in this scene are in serving positions. Like, it's fun giving things to people. I love sending people things. It's a nice feeling. It makes me smile, but that's also by choice. The fact that Adato is watching... I mean, if we survey the area, you can see a humour gear behind a stall, a humour gear giving out gifts, another humour gear behind a stall. All the while, the only people actually socialising are humans, and the fact that Adato can watch that and not see a problem with it is weird. It would have been nice if by now Adato was starting to second-guess things, and he looked at an image like this and it dawned on him. It could have been cool alongside Fua's more sympathetic approach to Horobi in this episode. I'm saying sympathetic, calling him a lump of metal doesn't scream sympathy, but you know what I mean. It could have been cool for them both to start questioning things in this episode, but no, Adato is watching humour gear working for humans and talking about how nice it is, and that's never going to change. And now Guy reveals that he was the one that built the Ark in the first place, a satellite on the verge of launch 12 years ago, having learned about the criminal psychology and foolish war-torn history of humanity. An AI opposed to humanity was born, known as the Ark. So what you're saying is... a human was responsible, and the Ark's data comes from real human data. So what it sounds like to me is that humans are the ones who need to work on proving themselves, not humour gear. And maybe it will be important later on to address that all the negative data from the Ark that had been forced onto Horobi is correct and valid, albeit only one half of the story, and that maybe we should, going forward, focus on exposing him to the more positive side for a good balance, rather than dismissing this very real negative data. You know, because just flat out telling Horobi he's wrong would be incorrect and actually very damaging. And while Horobi and Jin were hacked and exposed to all this negative data alone, the human who programmed this into the Ark in the first place was fully aware of what he was doing, and therefore it's actually all his fault, and we should focus on going after him and saving the hacking victims. Right? Because that's what it sounds like to me. So a Magia attacks almost as if the Ark and Guy are the real threats, and I just realised this happens at the same place Jin dies, so disturbing, horrible, we're celebrating Christmas where Adato murdered a baby. Okay, I know it's because Toei doesn't actually have that many places to film, but still. Despite creating Metsubo Jinrai Net, Guy says, it met its demise in the Daybreak incident and now slumbers at the bottom of a lake. Oh, interesting. So the satellite Guy programmed with negative data so it would oppose humanity for ZAIA's profit, then hacked Metsubo Jinrai. Interesting. So, again, it's Guy's fault and Metsubo Jinrai are just innocent hacking victims just like everybody else. Well, thanks for clearing that up, Guy. So right now... none of Metsubo Jinrai are actually connected to the Ark, right? I mean, Jin blew up and his data is just right there ready to revive. Horobi is about to wake up in the basement. Ikazuchi's data key is also right there ready and waiting. And Naki is a chip in through his head. And, you know, an AI needs a physical presence to be killed. And you've just said the Ark is at the bottom of a lake. So surely all that needs to be done now is for someone to go down and destroy it, right? Like, right now? I mean, Guy wouldn't, but, you know, if there's anyone else within ZAIA with this information who does want the Ark gone, I mean, now is the best time, right? To go down to the physical container the Ark is resting in and blow it up. Otherwise, you know, it's only a matter of time before everyone is revived again and the Ark grows stronger and gets a body of its own and starts being able to actually physically possess people. And it's just going to be harder and harder to defeat, and you're probably going to have to go all the way up to space, and that just seems like a lot more difficult than just nipping down into a lake and blowing it up now. I mean, what's it going to do? It's a satellite. And also, you've got one character who was hacked and brainwashed and controlled when all he wanted was a safe world for humour gear, and you've got a guy who created an evil satellite to oppose humanity purely so ZAIA would profit. So, you know, it's clear who out of these two are going to get the best redemption arc, right? I mean, it's obvious who out of those two is the most sympathetic. Yue then even says, to that end, you've exploited Metsubo Jinrai. Great, I am so glad this episode is really pushing that Metsubo Jinrai are in fact victims. It makes me feel so good about their chances. You know, we've got Fua starting to be less angry towards Metsubo Jinrai, Guy admitting to creating the Ark and using Metsubo Jinrai for ZAIA's profit, and Yue realising Metsubo Jinrai have been exploited. This makes me feel so optimistic about their future. Clearly, we're going to stop treating them like villains now. So Adato and Fua now fight these Magia. There are two now. And Fua swipes Adato's key and takes back his thing Adato nicked from Fua, saying, first of all, this was mine. And Adato goes, selfish as always. And like, you nicked that from Fua. He's not selfish and wanted it back. But listen, okay, that was kind of cute. It was kind of sibling-y. kind of like, oh, they're getting along now, but it's so hard to try and see things how I used to. Anyway, they fight, and oh god, I recognise that water feature. That's where Hase died from Guy. Oh, don't do that to me. I get such a visceral reaction to this place. I mean, you know you've been watching Toku for too long when you start recognising locations. Well, the scene of Shiro was antagonising Shinji happened here as well, and I felt exactly the same. This episode ends with another press conference, and the reporters are asking why the hell another human gear went berserk, given they were assured this wouldn't happen again since 3 out of 4 of Metsuo Jinrai members were killed. And Ames were like, "They're close enough. We don't need to think. We don't need to think about how he said there were probably 4 members." Anyway, Adato just says we're currently investigating, which, you know what? Fair. I know I get frustrated with him not doing anything, but he doesn't know what's going on, and he's got to remain professional. Someone asks if this means Metsuo Jinrai are still around, and he says they're currently looking into that possibility too. And I think Adato is handling this remarkably well, actually. Fukusori and Sanzo are on either side of him, clearly panicking, but Adato is keeping a cool head, and I commend him for that. He doesn't have all the answers, and he clearly has no experience with this and probably shouldn't be in this position, but he's doing well answering questions he doesn't have answers for. And even when the crowd starts getting loud and agitated and all yelling at him from various different angles, and Adato is clearly struggling, he's still trying to stay professional, and I think that's very good of him. I know this video has been going on for a while, but stay with me, there's only one bit left to talk about. Guy shows up and immediately all eyes are on him. And Nachi is approximately my age, and yet he plays the part of a 45-year-old so well. Like, you see Guy, and you see Adato, and you immediately see all the life experience in Guy that makes Adato look so young and inexperienced. Adato even has to ask Izu what a TOB means and still doesn't understand after she explains. Adato is such an underdog that it feels like we should be rooting for him in this scenario, but it's just, I've run out of patience at this point. Like, I don't want to root for Guy either, but it feels like it's more that I'm rooting against Guy than rooting for Adato. He's had plenty of opportunity at this point to be sympathetic, and he's not. My focus is on Humagir. Humagir are in terrible situations under Adato, but it'll be so much worse than Guy. Guy is actively promising to dispose of Humagir, as he puts it, to which Adato then says, "You don't get to decide, I'm Hiren's president." And shouldn't it be about how Humagir are people who don't deserve to die? He's just once again so self-centered and not about Humagir at all. Anyway, that's where my loyalty lies. Not with Adato or with Guy, but with Humagir, and they'd be better off with neither, but Adato just happens to be the lesser of two evils. Oh yeah, and then Horobi opens his eyes. Are you ready for Horobi's 6 seconds of screen time per episode? See the murdered child before us, fa la 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 la. Soon his brainwashed dad will join us, fa la 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 la. Tied upon the floor for the new year, fa la 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 la. When will we tell him his child was murdered, fa la 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 la.